Hi everyone, I'm Michele DeLuca, and this is Nancy Proulx. We are the Power Portal. We are talking about power today, your personal power and ours, how to evolve it and grow it. And we're talking particularly about wounding, aren't we? Everyone has a wound in life. Many of us have several wounds. And the whole point of our wounds, you say, is to do what?
Well, we live on a wounded planet. We all come down here. There's nobody that can escape being wounded. The level of trauma and the way we process it is different for each person. So what we want to do is learn to develop a level of resilience. But Caroline Myss, who is my mentor, back in the 1970s, she coined a phrase, and she described it as a woundology.
Woundology.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we end up, when bad things happen to us in life, they become something that defines us.
We all know people like that, right? Who say, how do you do? Let me tell you about my wounding, right?
Correct.
And they don't do it because they want to show off, typically, or they don't do it for any other reason, actually, than to introduce themselves. But they are wound forward, aren't they?
Correct. We've all been with the person who you sit down and you feel like when you leave, your whole energy level is a little bit down because they've just completely spilled the same old story.
Yes. Yes. And that's troubling, not just for the person that they're telling that story to, but for the person themselves, because what happens when you tell about your wounds over and over?
Well, they become part of your programming, but I actually would like to read what Caroline, how she coined it.
Okay.
Just so we have a really good understanding. So we're not meant to stay wounded. We're supposed to move through our tragedies and challenges to help each other move through the many painful episodes of our lives. By remaining stuck in the power of the wound, we block our own transformation. We overlook the greater gift inherent in the wound and the strength to overcome them and the lessons we're meant to receive through them.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's something that I believe most of us engage in at some level in our life. But I would really like to explain, since I come from such a animal and nature background, how wild animals deal with this completely different. Because in the wild, you don't see traumatized animals.
You do
around.
not. And
You
let's
do not.
step out of this conversation for just 1 second, because I want to talk about the experience you bring to this conversation. First of all, Nancy has trained with Caroline Myss, who is a renowned medical intuitive and author, and what I like to call a spiritual philosopher. She's a wise woman for our time. And Nancy trained with Caroline for 5 years and is certified as an intuitive counselor. And she has worked her entire life with animals, very much of that as an animal intuitive, healing, contacting the spirit of the animal, getting in touch with the spirit of the animal, and being able to tell the animal's owner what the trouble is if the animal is sick and how to make the animal well. Beyond that, she's an equestrian, has worked with horses for her entire, since you were a young adult, and used the information she gleaned from the horses also for her healing work. And we'll be able to talk about that in a second. I just want to say that I'm a journalist and an author, and I have written books on intuition, researched consciousness, and human gifts my entire adult life. So now that you know who we are, let's get back to our conversation about what the animals have taught you.
Well, when I started doing my equine facilitated learning, one of the mentors that was introduced was Dr. Peter Levine and his work. Now, Dr. Peter Levine is a psychologist, and what he realized is that we tend to get stuck in the wound. We end up, animals have a fight, flight, freeze response, and especially prey animals who are preyed upon. So in the one documentary that he notes in his book, Waking the Tiger, the documentary has antelopes that are running, and of course there's the lion, the predator, that is after. Of course, the predator takes down the weakest in the group. Once the animal goes down, it has a mechanism in its body that protects it from feeling the pain of being taken down. So when the animal goes down...
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, part of its psyche splits off, disassociates, so it does not feel the pain, and actually goes limp. The body of the animal goes limp. In this documentary, what we watched was...
I'll put the name of the documentary in the notes.
As the animal went down, and the predator, the lion, assumed it had killed its prey, got up and walked away, and at that point the animal came back to life, leaps up, shakes off, and runs off. And what we have realized in the human body is that we get frozen in that and it is the freeze response in the prey animal.
So we get frozen in the wound.
The energy gets frozen because we don't get up and shake it off.
Because we don't get up and shake it off.
We don't. We don't go running. We have that trauma. We get stuck in it, and we're talking here about deep trauma, and I don't deal with that unless I have a medical doctor, a psychologist present with me. But this is just an example of maybe what happens for someone when I work with the wounded warriors who have PTSD.
That's right, because you have for several years now worked with veterans who return from war, and they have PTSD, and you use the horses to teach the veterans how to be in their bodies, how to recognize what's taking place in their bodies, rather than living, say, out here or somewhere where all that emotion kind of stopped when they encountered the trauma of war.
Because they weren't able to run.
They had to stay.
They have to stay there. And even with an animal that's domesticated and we trap or hold in that, they will disassociate and continue. So I'm talking about the natural ability to let go and diffuse the energy in animals that are wild.
So you're suggesting that this trait of the animals can help humans heal from the wounds of their life, whether those wounds might be parents who spanked you or beat you, or the wound might be someone who's broke your heart, or the grief of the loss of a loved one, or a child that you love. Those are all traumatizing aspects of life. You're suggesting that those wounds can be healed, and we've talked about it, the fact that within those wounds are gifts to us. That I know is going to be hard for people to believe, that these wounds deliver gifts as well.
Correct. But it's that transformational process that we're talking about, that we interrupt that ability to move the power that trauma that's stuck in the nervous system.
So we do our own sort of shaking off, is what you're suggesting.
Some of us do.
No, and not naturally, not physically, not
right. What do most of us do?
We do.
What do we do normally? We talk about it continually and re-traumatize ourselves.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right?
It's interesting, yes,
right?
We do.
Right?
The vast majority of us do.
Yeah, so it's our thinking and our disconnection from the body, from being able to have a somatic release to what happened to us. And we tend to get something from the wound.
We get something from the wound. Attention, sympathy, Sometimes we get let off the hook for bad behavior because we're wounded. So where do you begin to address that wounding so that somehow or another you can get to the empowerment that wound can provide or offer?
First of all, recognizing, if we talk about this, okay, yeah, we get some attention, we get a payoff, really, easy, like awareness, self-awareness is most of what we are talking about. Just the other day, I had a bad night's sleep, and I think I snapped at my husband. And
no,
he said something to me, and I was like, oh, I wanted to defend myself and hold on to that excuse to have a little anger because I had a bad night's sleep, and I wanted to hang on to it. But that self-awareness is like, whoa, he's right. I could feel the resistance. And so this is where that somatic work, that getting that mind-body connection is so valuable for us.
Let's talk about that word somatic. You've mentioned that twice in the healing process. This is where the somatic process comes in. What exactly do you mean by that?
What I felt when I felt resistance in my body, like, oh, I want to hang on to this. I could actually feel a tightness. In paying attention, so when we're connected to the body, we can pay attention to it, be aware, oh, that's what resistance feels like. I have the choice to let it go.
You have the choice, but it's
to
so
change
hard.
Behavior. Yeah. And we talked about people who have similar wounds. They will get together and they
have a club.
Yes. Sit and talk about this, and they reinforce this wound. And again, they're getting a way to maybe get a little bit of release, but it's also like having a pet rock, and we keep feeding it and feeding it and feeding it.
Right. Tell them all our problems. All right.
Yeah.
So
the other area that I remember speaking with Caroline Myss with in our class was groups like recovery groups or grief count, any type of group work that it was, and this is, again, it's self-awareness. It's meant to be a raft to get us to the other side of the river, to get out and become responsible.
Yes, because ultimately lingering in that wound cannot serve you. It will not serve you. All right, so once you get to the other side of the river from your raft, from your security raft, you leave behind the circle of those who are sharing the wound with you. What do you do next?
Well, getting across the river, that's the challenge.
That is a challenge.
You become the teacher, I think, when you get to the other side. You're able to...
I love that, because everyone knows that grief groups can be important in the healing. Everyone knows that groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and parents who've lost children who gather together to survive that loss, those are very important for, like you said, the initial healing. And then you cross the river on the raft, you get out of the raft of protection, and then you become a teacher of sorts. That's interesting.
You are the wounded healer.
Or role model.
Right?
I love that. The wounded healer.
Yeah,
I like that.
That is, and many people in those organizations, they get the most fulfillment out of being of service to others who are making the journey.
The leaders of those organizations. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, right.
Or those anybody who
yeah.
join and lead the conversation, they get the most out of being of service. That makes perfect sense. And we are not denigrating in any way those groups, of course.
Yeah.
We're saying that once they have served their purpose in your life, if you haven't become a teacher within in those relationships, when you step onto the raft, onto the island, onto the
other side of the bank.
when you step to the other side of the bank, that this is the time that you can use what you've learned to help others heal. The wounded healer is a phrase often bandied about in the healing areas of life, holistic healing especially. Wounded healers actually are better teachers because they've been there. At least that's what that phrase, I think, was created for.
Yeah, and let me give you an example. I have a friend who had lost her son. He was 20, and he passed away from leukemia. And it was fairly sudden over the year, but a lot of journeying with the most wonderful doctors and the most wonderful nurses and staff that held her and her husband and their son during this very, very trying time. When she lost him, the doctors asked her if she would talk to a few other parents that were in a similar circumstance. She eventually went on to work for the practice and became that liaison.
Wow.
And she gathered so much strength and such a gift through the loss of her son that she was able to keep her heart open and share with everyone that you're going to make it through. Look at me. I have continued to live. My son would have wanted me to love and live. And that is a prime example of a wounded healer.
And also a prime example of gifts from the wounding. If we stay in the process and learn and take the wisdom from the wound, possibly what something greater than ourselves has maybe designed to, or even ourselves. Possibly some people believe that we plan out these lives for ourselves, for the lessons that we confront. And so that becomes all of those things, the wounded healer, healing others, and the gift of the wound by making your best life out of the wounds that you've been confronted with.
Yeah.
So the process begins how?
Well, first of all, we just touched a little bit on be careful what story that you are continuing to feed in your own head. And we are now realizing that with intention we create our reality, and that we do have the ability to spend some time in grief, but then also be able to raise our thoughts and raise that there's still joy available, not to live in the past, that we can in the present be present with the pain but still move forward, learn to change our thoughts, listen to inspiring speakers, people that are out inspiring you.
I'd like to say here that we all know that grief, you can't just go, okay, I've done my grieving and now I can move on. It circles back, and at times in our life a memory triggers it. So it's not as if we are suggesting that to let the grieving go. We are suggesting to incorporate the healing within the confines of the grieving and create something greater from that. Create a life that's greater from the wounding.
Right. And when we deal with emotion, we want to acknowledge that emotion, feel it at its core.
Every single time, right? It's a really bad idea to go, oh my God, I'm grieving, I feel horrible, and then say, well, I'm just going to smile and pretend that's not happening. Best to feel it to your core, to really go into your body, because that's what the horses teach especially.
Right.
Feel the feeling, go into your body for that feeling, not just in your head where you go, oh my goodness, I'm sad, but really feel where in your body those feelings arise, which we both believe is part of the process of healing, of encountering the grief and handling it for a better outcome, a better evolution, a better life from the gift of the wound.
Yeah, and we have to, after we feel it, we have to realize, oh, what's this emotion telling me? And, with grief, something was taken away before its time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So but to move through it, the gift of that is how do I celebrate this person, or how do I celebrate, if it's sobriety or something, how do I celebrate that?
Celebrate it, yes.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
all about moving through and moving forward. But we want to be aware of how much time we are spending in the wound. If you spend 24 hours a day in that wound and in feeling the pain, that's what I'm saying. Wow, what's the story that's going on? We have to be really aware of, what am I saying about this? How is it stopping me from living? How is it stopping me from being in the present moment, experiencing joy in the life? So it's not something, anybody that goes through a very, very traumatic, I definitely feel some type of professional help.
Absolutely.
Okay. If it's something that is not a PTSD life coach, even a good friend that can help you raise out of it, or just be a good ear. But it is about accessing the level of help you need. I mean, we do not want to gloss over this and say that this is an easy
There's
thing to
no
get
glossing
through.
over that kind of grief, and it's never easy to get through. And the message that you are delivering, the hope that you want people to walk away with, is to, as often as possible, feel the feeling, be aware of the feeling, kind of be in your body for that feeling, and then begin to climb out and search out inspirational stories, inspirational speakers, inspirational friends. Find the places where you can begin to heal, in a garden, in a hot bath, beautiful music, meditation, a funny movie. The areas, the pathways towards the attention to the grief, the balm over the grief, there are many. You mentioned taking a walk to me earlier. A walk is a good place to begin to resolve these feelings of grief, and to remember and celebrate the life that you've lost.
Yeah, and even if we're talking about, it's a loss of a relationship.
Good point.
Right? It doesn't
point.
even have to be a death. It could be a loss of a relationship. It could be, graduating from school and leaving all of your friends and having to start new.
Yes.
There's so it's just about, we have to realize that this is a wounded planet. We're all wounded. But to look for those people that have the tools, that have developed this resilience to be able to take on life and move through it, and continue to prosper and to live even, a bigger life with a bigger heart because of what you've gone through.
That's a beautiful, beautiful idea. All right. There are so many kinds of wounds. We both know that. And we talked about the mother wound, you and I. I know that in my life, I adored my mother. She adored me. And yet I drove her crazy in all the ways that I wouldn't behave as she wanted me to. And so there was often this, there were so many times I disappointed her. This while she was bragging about me to others. She adored me, and in that tight relationship, that makes the wounding even a little more painful, because you know that you're disappointing someone who loves you so much. That's the way I see the wounding in the mother wound. And we discussed that a lot of people have wounding from the relationship with their mother.
Well, women do, I think, the most, because the same-sex parent is the one that's most influential over your life. And I'm sure that a lot lot of men have
the father wound.
Father wound.
So
yeah.
the parent wound.
The parent wound.
The parent wound.
Right.
And again, it doesn't mean that the parent is doing something wrong to you. It simply means that whenever two people are in a really intimate relationship, like child and parent, even the wrong sentence can be remembered by that child for the entire rest of his or her life as criticism that's really painful.
Yeah, and what we have to look for is, because we can't go back and change the past.
We cannot.
But what we have to do is we always bring it back to ourselves. How critical am I of myself?
Yes.
That's the only thing we can change, is what's going on with us and how we deal with our own deepest self.
Yes. So what we might find ourselves doing is recreating the mother wound by ourselves, or the father wound, offering our own self-criticism instead of the best part of the parenting, which was, in many wonderful cases, the love, the love that was never intended to wound, but wounds anyway. It almost feels like a kismet situation with parent and child.
And to recognize, for me, like, sitting with my own issues with my mother always was always about how you looked and how you presented yourself. Whether you were a wreck inside, you still had to present yourself as being perfect. And I remember feeling into it and recognizing that my mother's idea of power was external beauty. And I remember saying to her, if external beauty is your power, that means as you age, you become powerless.
Oh my, yes. And in their generation, the outward perfection was almost, in my opinion, a safety measure to keep that child well and to keep that child successful. If you looked good, you were elevated in society, and they wanted to keep you safe by making sure you were elevated. And yet it's very painful, particularly for women, I think, as we get older, in those situations when we lose that perfection simply by virtue of our aging.
Right.
What are the messages we tell ourselves then?
Yeah, and you can't help but know that, wow, that's been programmed in. And we have to do a lot of inner work and forgiveness, not only of our mother, but of ourselves, and work through that. So it's the inner journey.
All right. So we're talking about the inner journey now. What does an inner journey look like? How do I get in touch with the emotions that are frozen, as you say, inside of me from circumstances that could be as long ago as when I was 3 years old and got my first spanking, that type of thing?
Well,
how do we access what's been frozen in our bodies?
I definitely feel that everybody in this time, in this day and age, needs to do a little bit work around meditation, self-awareness, body awareness, mind. What our mind is, what is running through our mind, those programmings, those limited beliefs. It's a journey. It's work.
Absolutely.
Either you find
it's
a group,
definitely work.
a group, you find somebody like me to work with, to help you excavate what is not true or what is preventing you from being connected to the authentic self. And it's a journey of self-awareness.
All right, I need some examples. Let's talk, for instance, about the work you do with veterans. When you take them into the barn, for instance, because this is the work you've done with veterans dealing with PTSD. You go into the barn, and in these programs that Nancy has done in the past, you don't ride the horse, you stand next to the horse and learn your truth. Is that the way you would say it?
There are tools to help people develop not only self-awareness, but emotional and social agility skills.
Oh, I like that. Emotional and social agility. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So we have to become more flexible, but it starts off, first of all, many exercises of getting grounded, getting connected, feeling not only first their five senses, but then their inner world. And that is the foundation part. Finding a place within yourself that's quiet, meditation, sitting in nature, spending that time. Those are those foundation pieces, being grounded and centered. Then you can work with boundaries. you have a 1,000-pound animal in front of you. Anybody who comes and stands in front of a horse that is not aware of maybe the danger of them, they think they're a big pet, you can watch that horse walk right into the person and just walk right through their boundary.
Push them around, so to speak.
Yes. Or there's...
Well, we did some of that work together, and that's very interesting because you really can, with a horse, almost intuitively set your boundaries, or at least your intention for a boundary. And if the horse feels that you have done so, they will respond in kind. Is that true?
Yeah, but it has to be authentic. And grounded, and this takes time. I would never put somebody new in front of a horse that would push somebody in an unsafe way.
Got it. So the horse is a really good barometer in how you're doing your work.
Yes. You might first start them out with a horse that just a little bit, maybe after they get to know you, starts, stepping in, and you'll actually, and this is where that awareness of the body comes in, you'll actually see that person maybe kind of the top part of their body moving back, and they're not even aware that they're feeling the push from the horse. And then we look at, how does this happen in everyday life with other people?
Right. If
how
it's
do
a
I
human
ignore...
instead of a horse, more often than not, they're doing this emotionally to you.
Yeah.
And you, in a perfect world, need to learn to respond to that kind of emotional pressure and boundary breaking with the kinds of things that you can learn if you're paying attention, if you're body aware, if you know the feelings in your body and what they're trying to tell you. You become more aware about all the circumstances of your life when you have to relate to other people, even relating to your own well-being and the kinds of things that your I don't know, want to say ego ever offering up. Oh, you didn't do that right. My God, what a mess that is that you made. And sometimes to have these singular empowerment of knowing where your boundaries are and really who you are, not diminished by those negative voices in your head and not diminished by your own insecurities. So this work tends to that, the work that you are bringing into the world at this time.
Yeah, and it moves on from there. We go through emotions, how to move through emotions in a healthy way. The mind, the horse does not have that loop that goes on in their head.
That's right. They shake it off.
They're much more authentic in their response, which it is. It's a response versus a reaction.
Do we want to be authentic in our responses? For instance, this morning or the other day, you mentioned you were angry and you got up and you hadn't slept well and you really wanted to be authentic. Authentic would mean you say, I'm cranky.
I didn't say that. I just reacted. I did not respond. I reacted.
I see.
And
so what would the appropriate response have been then?
Well, I believe I did eventually act in a correct response because I said, "Oh, he's right. He's right. Drop it. This day is not going to be a mess. It's not going to be horrible just because I had a bad night's sleep." So I was already in that wound when we talk about wound and setting up my day for it to be not so great day because I didn't sleep. No, so there was the voice of being optimistic. And it was almost like, oh, I didn't want that optimistic voice to come in because I wanted to stay in my pain. And that's the wound.
I want to stay in my pain.
Yes.
And that, getting back to all the woundology, that's what we're trying to address here. You have some ideas how those who are listening to us right now can begin to at least become aware of their own woundology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think we've mentioned a little bit of it, is just to recognize the story, stop the story. We do not need to stay in the past.
We don't have to talk about it over and over. We can talk about it occasionally?
It depends on, I would look at what your motivation and your agenda for talking about it is.
What is your motivation and agenda?
Yeah.
And we've said this several different ways in
Yeah.
this conversation. What is your motivation for telling the story? Perhaps you might want to turn the page.
Yeah, and if I don't mention it, can I go back and process it myself? Or do I want to just talk about it because, I maybe need to reinforce it. I need to be right. My version of reality has to be right.
Well, how I mean, I could understand that a person wants to say, but I need to tell these people who I am. I need to tell them that I've been wounded here and here and here. Otherwise, they won't know me.
That's not the true you, the wound. Remember, we want them to...
It was me.
Yeah, we want to... This is called transformation. Going through the wound, finding the power, loosening the stuck energy in the system so that we actually get to know ourselves more. We're connected. We have more value of who we are. It's the wound is what's in the way of preventing us from the authentic self.
Well, what is the value of being your authentic self?
You understand your own truth. You know your own truth. You might listen to the truth of another, but you get to recognize, well, that's not my truth. This is my truth. Not only does it free up creativity, I believe that for me, it's my connection to spirituality, to spirit.
To spirit, not just spirituality.
Yeah.
With
spirit.
that wounding kind of tended to and maybe tucked away for a little while, or even shaken out of your body, you have room, I believe, as well, to bring in more creativity, more intuition, and even more connection to your wiser self, or if you believe in guides, which we both do, you believe in, because as I said, I've researched consciousness existing outside of the body my entire adult life, and if it's not true, there are millions of people who have experienced it as truth, that we survive out of our body. So, little aside there, but going back
No, that was perfect. And you explained it in a couple words, and that is, there's more room for me.
Oh, I like that.
That's
There's
what it is.
more room
There's
for me.
more room for me. Okay.
For my evolution to something stronger and greater, and by coincidence,
And connection.
not only connection, but more personal power, which is the whole point of the podcast.
Yep.
So excellent.
Yeah.
Any more to
Thank you.
add?
No, I think that's quite a conversation.
That's wonderful. Thank you. All good stuff. Personal power. We're talking about expanding it, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Thank you.